Hi there, in this video I'm going to try and demystify choosing a lens and help you decide which one to buy next. Now I remember when I had my first interchangeable lens camera and I had got no idea about all the differences between lenses, what all the numbers on the side of the lens meant, how to choose one from the other, why one was more expensive than another lens. It was just completely confusing, and over time you do start to get used to it and it starts to become clearer. But I do know that if you're starting out in the world of photography, it can be a really confusing minefield. So what I'm going to try and do in this video is demystify the process for you and try and explain what the difference between lenses is, what all the numbers mean, and help you decide what camera lens you should buy first or next if you're wanting to upgrade your camera system. So stay tuned, because I know that I'm really going to help you to enjoy your photography. Now in front of me you can see all of my lenses laid out. Over time I have sold some and bought new ones, but it's not a quick process to build up this many lenses. This particular lens is nearly 20 years old, but it still fits the cameras that I've got. The first thing that you need to consider is the make of camera that you have, because each manufacturer has a different way of mounting the lenses to the camera bodies, and different lenses from different manufacturers don't mix and match. So that's the first thing that you have to be aware of. Now there are third-party manufacturers such as Sigma or Tamron as an example that will make lenses that will fit different camera mount systems, so it's worth just being very clear what mount your camera has. Now the next thing that you need to consider is whether your camera is a full frame or a crop sensor, and that will make a difference to what kind of lens you buy. This particular lens is a Nikon lens and it has DX on it, and this means it's designed for a crop sensor, whereas this lens has an N on it and that's designed for a full frame sensor. Now you can interchange the two, but if you use a crop lens on a full frame sensor, then the image will be cropped as well. Now if you're a Canon user, the lenses are labeled differently, so a full frame sensor is an EF lens and an EF-S is a crop sensor lens. Now the final thing that you'll need to know about your camera is it a DSLR or is it a mirrorless camera, because again they have different mounts as well. On the Nikon we've got the N mounts for the DSLR, and then we've also then got the Z mounts for the mirrorless cameras. If you are a DSLR user and are thinking of moving over to mirrorless and are worried that you're going to have to buy a load of new lenses, then you can get adapters such as this one just here that will adapt the old DSLR lenses to the new mirrorless mounts, and all camera systems have adapters like this one. Now it's fair to say that the lens is probably the most important part of your camera. If you spend more money on lenses, you'll get better photographs than if you spend more money on camera bodies, and so it's worth trying to invest in the best quality lenses that you can. But that doesn't mean that you need to start off with something really expensive. This particular lens that I've got here is my oldest lens. It came with my first DSLR and it was a kit lens. Now generally speaking, kit lenses aren't quite as good quality as the more expensive lenses, but they still do a really good job. This picture just here was taken on my honeymoon with this lens, and it still stands up even now as a really good photograph. But the limitations you get from a kit lens are the fact that the optics aren't quite as good, so if you want to blow the image up or look really carefully, it might not be quite as pin sharp as some of these other lenses. But lenses have improved over time, and a kit lens that you buy today will more than likely be much better than this kit lens that I bought 20 years ago. Now you'll get to a point in your photography where you want to take better quality images, and you might find that the kit lens just is not versatile enough. And so you need to choose the right lens for the type of photography that you want to do. Now the first and best choice that you probably want to go for is something like this, which is a variable zoom lens. So it's got quite a lot of range from a wide end to a telephoto lens. Now this particular lens is for my mirrorless camera, and it's got a range of 24mm to 200mm. Now those numbers might not mean a great deal to you, but the small numbers basically mean that the lens can see a lot, so it's got a very wide field of view. And the 200 end means that the field of view gets narrowed because you've zoomed in a lot, so it gives you more magnification. And then because it's variable zoom, as you twist the zoom ring, it goes to all of the focal lengths in between, so you can do a wide angle shot or a really zoomed in shot with the same lens. There is a slight downside to these variable zoom lenses. On the lens, as well as the zoom range, so on this one it's 24mm to 200, there are also some other numbers, and those are the aperture values. Now the aperture is like an iris in your eye inside the camera lens that opens and closes to let light in. The small number is how wide the aperture will be when the lens is zoomed out at its widest, and the bigger number will be the size of the aperture when the lens is zoomed in as much as it will go. Now the more expensive the lens, the smaller that gap between those numbers will be, and the really expensive lens have a fixed aperture, maybe of 2.8 all the way through the zoom range, but that's one of the things that you're really paying for. So for example, this lens here is a very large lens because this is a 70 to 200mm lens, but it stays at a maximum aperture of 2.8 all the way through the zoom range. And so you might ask yourself, what benefit does that have? And it's really got two benefits. Now the first benefit is the amount of light that will be let into the lens. So if you've got less light available, this kind of lens will work much better. Now the other benefit of having a fixed aperture is how quickly the lens will focus. Now a lot of people don't realize that that really does affect the speed that the lens will acquire an automatic focus lock. So the way that it works is the lens will leave the aperture open at its maximum while it achieves a focus lock, and then will stop the lens down to the required value to take the shot, and then it will open back up again for the next autofocus acquisition, just so it's really fast. And that can make a real difference if you're trying to get a focus lock of something that's moving really quickly. We then start to move on to more specialist lenses, and for me that tends to be the ones I have for taking pictures of wildlife, and for that I need a long telephoto lens that will zoom into quite a distance. Now these lenses can get really expensive. For a fixed aperture long lens you can pay up to £10,000 and more. Now I haven't got anything in that kind of bracket, but this is probably my most expensive lens at the moment. This is a Z lens that goes with my mirrorless camera, and this is a 100 to 400mm lens, so it's got quite a good zoom range for getting closer to wildlife and birds. So this is why I use this one, but I have got an even longer lens, which is this one, which goes up to 500mm. Now this one is mainly the one I use with my DSLR, but it will go onto the mirrorless camera using the adapter. Now one downside of a lens like this is it's pretty heavy. It's not impossible to hand hold it, and it's got an inbuilt vibration reduction as well to help when you are hand holding it. But if you're going to be somewhere for a long period of time and taking photographs of wildlife, you won't want to keep holding this because it's going to make your arms very tired very quickly. So if you've got this kind of lens attached to your camera, then you're going to want to use some kind of tripod or monopod. Now another thing that I quite often use is a beanbag. If you've got somewhere to rest the camera, The beanbag is very stable and it makes for a really good temporary tripod because it moves about really easily, but it gives you a very stable platform to take photographs from. The final kind of lens that you can get is a prime lens. Now this is different because it will not zoom in and out. It's got a fixed focal length, but this can have quite a few benefits. For one, they can be cheaper, they can be lighter, they can often be better quality because they're not trying to do multiple jobs. They're only designed to work at one particular focal length, and also they tend to have larger maximum apertures. So this particular lens is a 20mm wide angle lens and the maximum aperture is 1.8, and I bought this specifically for astrophotography. Not that I've done very much of it, but it's great for taking wide angle shots in very low light conditions. Now the other benefit of having a wide maximum aperture is you get a very shallow depth of field. So if you're wanting to take some artistic shots with out of focus backgrounds, then a very wide maximum aperture will really help you with this. This particular prime lens is a 35mm prime lens, but it is a DX crop sensor lens. So when I put it on a full frame camera, I do get equivalent of about 50mm. Now I've not got rid of this lens because a 50mm prime is really good for taking portraits because it almost exactly approximates what you see with your eye. Now the final prime lens I've got is this 105mm lens that's got a maximum aperture of 2.8, but this is also a macro lens. So this means that the minimum focusing distance is going to be really close to the end of the lens. So it's great for taking really close-ups of flowers or insects, and it's a great lens to have in your bag for taking that kind of shot. Now I do hope I've managed to demystify the minefield that is choosing a lens, and it's given you a little bit more of an idea of where to start from. But if there is still questions you have, you can ask me down below in the comments, or just have a look on the internet. Ring up a camera company. There are lots about that have really good helplines, and they can give you some advice as well, or pick up a camera magazine. There are going to be so many different ways to find out information. Don't feel overwhelmed because there is help available. Now, if you have enjoyed this video or have any questions at all, do let me know down below in the comments, or nip over to my Vero or Instagram account, leave me a comment there, and you can also see lots of my photographs. Now, if you like what I do on the channel and want to help support me to make future content like this, then you can leave via the gift shop at Teespring. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer, so head off over there, check that out. And a purchase really is very much appreciated. And also don't forget the super thanks button as well. But you don't have to spend any money at all to support the channel. You can do that simply by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications, because it really helps me out and it makes sure that you don't miss out on any future content. Watch out for next week's video, that goes live on Sunday. In the meantime, go and check out this video just up here. But all that's left now is to say, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.